Comic book readers are a cynical bunch these days. A lot of times, even when they're enjoying something, they're waiting for the rug to literally be ripped out from underneath them. Case in point, people have been wondering, when are they actually going to kill off MJ in Ultimate Spider-Man? Because there's no way that Marvel Comics and Jonathan Hickman are actually going to give us what we want long term. The other big-time hotness within comic books right now is the Energon Universe under Robert Kirkman and Skybound. Been a breath of fresh air. Daniel Warren Johnson, obviously, on Transformers. And then we've had Josh Williamson over on the G.I. Joe stuff, and then Larry Hama on the old school Real American Hero series. And it's been absolutely awesome. But I had been hearing behind the scenes, like, don't hold your breath. Most of these contracts are very, very short. And if you like these writers and you like the creative that they're doing, don't get used to it, because it's not likely to last, and it appears that is the case. We have a couple of new people coming aboard the Energon Universe that don't quite stack up with Daniel Warren Johnson and Josh Williamson when it comes to writing talent, and certainly don't stand up to Daniel Warren Johnson as an artist, or even Tom Riley as an artist when it comes to the artistic talent. We're taking a little bit of a nosedive here. Perhaps Robert Kirkman and Skybound didn't realize the financial windfall that the Energon Universe would be, because the sales have been greater than they really ever expected. And we do know, and I think this is very interesting, recently Ben Abernathy, who's been the group editor over at Batman at DC Comics, left his post there. He was the group editor for Batman, moved over to Skybound Entertainment. I was like, I wonder if he's going to be working much on these Energon Universe titles. He's a bigger name guy. He's been around for decades, really all over the industry. And I was like, man, really hope he's not working on this Energon stuff, because he's been hiring nothing but writers that don't belong in the DC Batman universe. Chip Zdarsky's been a failure. Ram V's been a failure. Dan Waters' been a failure. Kelly Thompson's been a failure. Tom Taylor's been a failure. Certainly Megan Fitzmartin's been a failure. Most everything that he's done for the last year and a half at Batman was not going well. And this has the stink of Ben Abernathy and his ties to DC Comics and who he's currently working with all over it. We've got Kelly Thompson and Dan Waters coming into the Energon Universe. Skybound Entertainment has announced 2 new G.I. Joe series, Destro and Scarlet. The 2 new series join Duke and Cobra Commander, the publisher's first 2 G.I. Joe series. Both will arrive in comic shops in June of 2024. So that is not all that far down the road, where you're getting the follow-up titles, I assume, to Duke and Cobra Commander, because we don't have a fully established G.I. Joe and likely Cobra yet. We've got Mars and whatever it is that the actual U.S. military is doing. We don't have the G.I. Joe. So we got some more miniseries. Me personally, if I'm wanting to make a lot of money, if I'm wanting to print money, I'm doing a Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow miniseries, perhaps Snake Eyes versus Storm Shadow and a Destro miniseries, something like that. But Destro makes a whole lot of sense. I guess Scarlet also makes sense. Big name characters within the G.I. Joe team, and obviously the Cobra hierarchy. So I have no issues with the titles, although I do think I would have leaned into Snake Eyes and probably Storm Shadow and had 2 miniseries that kind of ended up colliding with each other, because those are 2 of the most well-known and popular G.I. Joe characters out there. They've chosen a different path, kind of laying the groundwork. But obviously, my real issue is with the creative talent that they have hired. A press release from Skybound reports that Scarlet will be written by Kelly Thompson with art by Marco Ferrari. The series revolves around Shayna Scarlet O'Hara, an original member of the G.I. Joe team. Scarlet is about to take on one of the most dangerous missions of her career, infiltrating Japan's Arashikage clan and discovering a game-changing weapon. Thompson expressed her excitement about the upcoming series, quote, "I'm fortunate that, thanks to my job, I often get to dig into characters and worlds that I've loved for a long time. And for some reason, I just don't see Kelly Thompson as a G.I. Joe head. I don't think she's been a lifelong G.I. Joe fan. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't think Kelly Thompson is like a lifelong comic book fan. She doesn't seem to know much about the characters. She doesn't seem to know much about the universes. She's had a couple of decent books. And I guess if you were to press me and people said, Wes, who's the best female comic book writer in comic books today? It would probably come down between Kelly Thompson and G. Willow Wilson. And maybe Kelly Thompson gets it because Mr. and Mrs. X was better than I think G. Willow Wilson's Poison Ivy series is. But currently she is doing that Birds of Prey series at DC Comics that obviously Ben Abernathy hired her for. He's the main editor on that book. And I hear people saying that this is one of the 10 best books in all of comic books. And I do not know what you're looking at. I do not get it whatsoever. And what's interesting about that is you do have a character that's completely out of character in there, an orphan, not really supposed to speak, you know, obviously a badass fighter in her own right, one of the best hand-to-hand combat artists in all of DC Comics. And she's a regular fucking chatty Cathy. She's like, she's at the cafeteria table in middle school or something. She will never shut up and stop gossiping. And then obviously within the G.I. Joe universe, you do have Snake Eyes, another hand-to-hand combat expert within the G.I. Joe universe that doesn't speak basically ever. Is he going to be talking too? Because she doesn't seem to get the characters. And I am a little bit not happy that they're calling it a Scarlet book, but they're also talking about Japan's Arashikage clan, because everyone knows that's where Snake Eyes went to train with Storm Shadow before, obviously, they went down their different paths, and that's how he became a ninja and got all of his training and all that kind of stuff. And the Arashikage clan is very important. That is very important lore to the G.I. Joe universe and establishing it, and obviously establishing Snake Eyes in Storm Shadow. Probably one of the most well-established rivalries, not only in like comics or even in like cartoons, but just like American fiction history. People know that the arch nemesis of Snake Eyes is Storm Shadow, and people that like Storm Shadow know that Snake Eyes is his arch nemesis. And I imagine we're going to be getting the beginning introductions of probably Storm Shadow in here. I don't think we'll get Snake Eyes, but perhaps he'll be there as well. I don't want Kelly Thompson introducing stuff that is that important to the future of the Energon Universe just working, and the G.I. Joe team in general. A lot of people were excited. They're like, you know what? Robert Kirkman's not going to let us down. He's going to make the right hires. You know, he went out there and got the best people right off the bat. Well, he made a big mistake on round 2, because like I said, maybe Kelly Thompson is the best female writer in comic books, but that ain't saying much. She's not really all that good. She doesn't have a whole lot of sales. And I have a hard time imagining that she ever really even liked G.I. Joe and probably didn't even know who Scarlet was before she got this gig or whatever. I do think the hiring on the second book is even more perplexing. The second miniseries, Destro, comes from writer Dan Waters and artist Andre Brezin. This story's official synopsis from Skybound reads, James McCullen Destro, the 24th, is the man behind Mars Industries, the undisputed leader in providing high-tech weapons to the world powers for the right price. But the emergence of Energon has changed everything. As Destro's ambitions grow, the Crimson Twins, Tomox and Zamat, Paoli emerge to destroy their competition, and Cobra Commander realizes his current ally could be his future greatest enemy. And there's some exciting stuff in there. I do like Destro. I do like the fact that he looks so weird, but he's almost like this really regal character. You know, he has his own castle and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think Destro is really compelling, and obviously the look is amazing. And bringing in the Cobra twins, yes, thank you very much. I'm all for that, and establishing the foundation of what Cobra is going to be and how they rise to power and the different dynamics between Cobra Commander and Destro and all that stuff. But Dan Waters, like, are you kidding me? Is this going to be like an introspective character study of Destro? Or is there going to be fucking action in this book? Like, why didn't you hire Ram B for this so it would never do anything there too? I mean, I like Dan Waters. I think he's talented. But he is fucking terrible on superheroes. He does not know how to write action. In fact, I would say he doesn't know how to move a story forward for the most part. And it feels like oil and water within this Energon universe. I can't imagine a writer being more out of place within the Energon universe and what they've established and the frenetic pace and the action and the enormous stakes and all the stuff that's happening than Dan Waters. Maybe Brian Lee O'Malley, the guy from Scott Pilgrim, would be a worse fit for Destro in the Energon universe than Dan Waters. But there ain't many of them out there. I mean, I don't understand what's going on here. The only way that this even makes sense to hire Kelly Thompson, who makes more sense but no sense whatsoever, and then Dan Waters, who, like, I don't even understand the reasoning there, is that you hired Ben Abernathy, and he's bringing people that he enjoyed working with during his final days at DC Comics as a Batman group editor, and was like, well, Dan always meets deadlines, and he basically writes the story that I tell him to, and Kelly Thompson was somewhat easy to work with, so maybe we'll bring them in because I like them, rather than going out there and hiring the right people, which is really the secret sauce to why the Energon universe is absolutely blowing up right now. When you had Daniel Warren Johnson and Josh Williamson and Tom Riley and obviously Larry Hama and Chris Moodyham and all these people, you have these really talented creators that get the characters, that get the universe, that want to be a part of this. And then for round number 2, you just bring in a couple of, I don't know, fucking scabs. I don't even know what to call them. They're not really great comic book superhero writers. And I do think it will probably go down that hiring Ben Abernathy was a really bad idea. But probably the biggest or the worst idea about all this was making their contracts so short. You're just kind of running through artists and you're running through writers. Daniel Warren Johnson coming aboard and illustrating the first 6 issues of Transformers, but then replaced by somebody that makes no sense, only sticking around for the first 12 issues as a writer on Transformers before John Layman comes in. Chris Mooneyham doing the Real American Hero series before he's replaced by another artist that isn't nearly as good as him. And then obviously Josh Williamson just coming in for these 4-issue bursts on these miniseries. And it doesn't feel like it's sustainable. It's not long-term planning. It's not built for success over a 10-year period or even a 5-year period. I guess, I don't know if I had to guess right now, just with what I know, the talk behind the scenes, and obviously the big press release that we got this week, that the Energon Universe is going to be a fucking blip on the radar. It's going to be there for a year. It's going to be exciting. And then all the warts are going to show up and you're like, oh, but now it's Kelly Thompson instead of a good comic book writer. Now it's Dan Waters instead of an actual action-based comic book writer. And it just kind of all collapses in on itself as you bring in a bunch of other people that likely don't care about the characters, the history of the lore, any of that stuff, and likely don't care for your fans and all that kind of stuff. And it just kind of goes away and probably never gets down to the IDW levels because I don't think Robert Kirkman will let them trash it to that degree, but certainly not the juggernaut that it is right now. And that's sad because I'm super excited about Energon. And you just can't water it down with bad talent. There's too much bad talent around. Everybody is aware of who the real stinkers are out there. If you would like continued talk about Cobra and G.I. Joe and all that kind of stuff and geek culture and comic books, I do invite you to go check out the Patreon if you have not done so yet. Lots of fun stuff going on over there. Lots of really long podcasts, 2.5 hours with Aaron Sparrow, Doc, Jim from Weird Science. Obviously, I'm there for all that kind of stuff. If you haven't seen that, there's a link in the video description, and I think you just might find what you were looking for.